here today to talk with you about the following question. Should milk really matter to the coffee industry? Of course, it's a necessary part of the business, we all know. But more specifically, where does it fall in the priority list for you as business owners, as manufacturers, marketers, and even educators in the coffee industry? To help us think through this question of whether milk choice matters, I'll be referring to Straus Family Creamery because that's where I have my deepest experience. But the real goal here is not so much to talk about Straus, our company, as it is to help you to understand and offer some examples of how dairy brands and dairy companies can really differ from one another. And also, how the choices that milk companies make can be just as important as the ones that you all in the coffee industry are making every day too. So in fact, to understand the differences, I'll suggest understand the differences between, or the complexities rather, of between milk is not much different from understanding the complexities in coffee. Untrained eyes look at two different cups of coffee and may see something very similar. But we all know that those two cups of coffee can be very, very different. And those differences occur at a couple of different levels. At the sensory level of what we taste and what we smell, and even what we learn, what we hear is what I learned yesterday. But also at a deeper level, and that includes the people, the practices, and the values that go into growing beans and brewing that cup of coffee. Every cup of coffee has its own unique and rich story behind it, and the same exact thing is true of milk. So in the next few minutes, we'll look at some of the complexities of milk. Again, the people, the farms, and the techniques that are behind the brands that you choose for your business every day. And my hope is that after today, you'll think about milk differently, and especially how your choice of milk may say something about your own brand and your own values. So I'd like to ask you all to think for a moment about what it is that brought you into the coffee industry. What is that thing that drove you to the craft that you all practice today? It might be something like this. Meraki, it's a Greek word. It doesn't translate well into English, but it essentially means putting your passion and your soul into your work. So it's something very special about the way that you work. I'm going to show you a quick video here of a couple of baristas from Flying Goat Coffee in Healdsburg, California, where we are, as they were coming out of a barista competition recently in San Francisco, and they're going to talk about this.
Oh, you're working today, and it's really hard to think of it as work when you work in this industry. Being able to work with great milk, great coffee, and good friends is always awesome. So yeah, I was just telling Andrew that we woke up this morning and probably not thinking we were going to be here, and now we've met like over 100 people that we didn't think we were going to meet, so it's really great.
I woke up at 4:30 this morning to start a shift and get off work, go directly up to Healdsburg. So I'm working in Santa Rosa, go up to Healdsburg, do a cupping for a couple hours. Then from there, we pile into a car and drive down to San Francisco to take part in a latte art throwdown. So no, this is what we live and breathe. We all home roast.
So this is what we live and breathe. That is meraki. And if you're an owner who's traveling 6 months out of the year to find the best growers and the best beans, or you're like these baristas who don't distinguish between their work and their passion, then you get this sentiment of what it means to put your soul into your work. And meraki also describes how many of us in the dairy industry also work. That includes the farmers who are caring for cows, like Jill and her family, and the folks that we work with. Includes the people who work in the creameries who are making milk ready to drink, and of course the folks who are out, in and out, working with our customers every day. So for our company, this idea of putting your passion and your soul into your work started a long time ago when the parents of our founder, Albert Straus, started their own dairy farm in California in Westmoreland County in 1941. Sometime after that, though, in the 1970s, things really started to change, and there were advances in technology and in pharmaceuticals that brought about efficiencies in agriculture that put a lot of pressure on smaller dairies to try and go big. Some of those dairies did, in fact, do so, and they turned into larger industrial farming operations with very high levels of production. Some of the dairies attempted to compete, fell into debt, unfortunately, and failed. And only some survived. So Joe might be giving away my punchline here, but this is just to give you an example. In the 1940s in the United States, we had 4.5 million dairy farms. And today we have 49,000 or close to 50,000. So really, really steep decline. I think the thing to remember here is that dairy farmers, those farmers who were struggling at that time are and were entrepreneurs just like many of you here today. And they want the same exact things that most entrepreneurs want. They want a way of life that provides independence. They want pride in ownership, creativity of craft, and a legacy for their families. But at this time, in these decades, that way of life was being slowly eliminated. So coming of age during this time, in growing up in an agricultural community that was filled with family farms, is exactly what inspired Albert Straus to found our company in 1994. When he saw this way of life being threatened, he really wanted to do something to change that trajectory. So this included using farming practices that protected the land, protected the animals, and our planet, frankly. What was happening at the time, agribusiness, concentrated feeding operations, and medicating animals to stimulate production did not support those values, but organic farming did. So this is where the passion and soul for our company started, but that's just our story. There are many, many other dairy farmers out there who have their own stories. So how is it that a dairy farmer goes from translating these values into action? Typically by the practices that he or she chooses to use, and somebody else mentioned this earlier, in how he or she is running the business. Here are some of the choices that we make at our company. One of our primary values is respect, and when I'm talking about respect, I'm talking about respect for the animals, respect for the land, and the environment. And there's really many different strategies that we use, both on the farm and at the creamery, to support this value. We don't have time to talk about them all today, but I certainly hope we'll have a chance to in the salons later. But one or two of the most important ways that we do this is through our commitment to farm organically and our commitment to create only organic dairy products. Alongside that value is our commitment to take extra steps, both at the farm and at the creamery, to ensure that our products are free of genetically modified organisms, or GMOs. We were the first dairy to make this commitment in North America, and we're thrilled to see that so many other dairies are now making the same commitment. A second critical distinction for us is relationship. And here specifically I'm talking about the relationships with the farmers who supply us with milk, organic milk, for us to make our products, as well as the customers who are buying those products. I'm going to come back to this in a moment after I talk about our third value, one of my favorite, which is taste. Taste and flavor are really the heart of the food industry that we all work within. And for our company, what we value is not only the quality of taste, but a really distinctive taste in the milk. One that you immediately notice, and one that stays with you for a long time afterward. I'm going to show you another quick video here of a couple of baristas from Intelligentsia who you may recognize talking about this idea.
I don't want to say grassier because that makes it sound
Slightly
bad.
floral, yeah, like slightly floral, like like slight chamomile, sweet, creamy,
Yeah,
creamy.
chamomile would be-
And they're just like really subtle, beautiful, like herbaceous floral notes that come out in the milk a little bit.
And
what time of the year?
Probably spring, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
I assume it's when the diets change.
Yeah. When the flowers.
Yeah.
Their diets probably change, and that's what we're tasting a little bit.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
What's interesting here is that Eden and Melissa are talking about the milk, not while they're tasting it, but they're doing it from recall. The milk was distinctive enough that the brain actually created a memory of it. And so again, milk can be just as complex as coffee. Bright, floral, umami, those attributes all describe milk just as they could any other agriculturally derived beverage like wine or like coffee. Food that's made from what we grow in the earth is influenced by the land and by the climate. And for milk specifically, taste is influenced by what the cows eat. So the land and the climate, or the terroir, for our milk comes from where the cows are grazing. Our cows seasonally graze in West Marin and Sonoma counties in California. And these areas are known by botanists to contain grasses that exist only in those areas, nowhere else in the United States. The grasses are also influenced by the fog that rolls in off the Northern California coast. This is a photograph of our butter at the creamery. The bright, brilliant yellow color you see is from the carotene in the pasture grass and the forages that the cows are eating. And our butter is made from 100% cream and only cream. So it's probably the purest example of us letting the terroir in the milk drive the characteristics of the product. So now I want to switch briefly to tell you a story related to taste and the unique taste of our milk, but how in this case the taste wasn't quite enough. This is the story of our organic barista milk, that some of you may have had an opportunity to taste, I think, at the coffee bar downstairs, and I think will in the labs later today too. But after about 13 years in the business, our unhomogenized milk, our cream top milk, which is the only milk that we sold at the time, was gaining a real following amongst baristas in the Bay Area. They loved to use it because it was organic, and they loved to use it because of the unique taste. But something else about it wasn't working. Cream top milk is very dense, it can be inconsistent, and it just wasn't creating a good microfoam, probably for some of the reasons you heard Tom just share with us. So it was Mark Inman, who some of you may know here, at the time head of TaylorMade Coffee, who approached Albert Straus and said, I'd really love it if you would, we love your milk, but the cream top isn't working. I'd really love it if you'd make a milk that is just for coffee. So we were intrigued by the idea, of course, and what we did is we invited baristas to come to our creamery to bring their experience, their palettes, and their espresso machines, and to help us develop this product. So these are photographs from the day that we did that in 2007. We called it a barista jam. We had some music. All these baristas came out to the creamery. And what they were doing, the purpose of the event, was to test milk that was homogenized at different levels directly as it came out of the pasteurizer. So here's just a quick background on homogenization. When milk comes out of the cow, both before and after pasteurization, it's cream top milk. That's the way it naturally is. What that means is it naturally wants to separate. So the fat wants to clump together and stay separate from the liquid. When you homogenize milk, you essentially force it through a very thin valve, like you see here in the diagram. And the force will rupture the fat molecules so that they then disperse into the liquid. So what you're doing is your homogenization is creating a temporary emulsion that slows down the milk's natural tendency to want to separate, and it helps the fat stay stable in the solution. The force that's used to push the milk through is measured in pounds per square inch, or PSI. And different processors use different PSI depending on the technique that they're using or the products that they're making. Here's why this matters. The milk that is homogenized at low PSI will have very different foaming qualities from milk homogenized at high PSI. The homogenization process, again, pointing to Tom's talk earlier, essentially makes more of the proteins attached to the fat globule that actually surround it. And it helps the milk to create a stable solution. And one thing that many baristas know is that the more availability of those milk proteins that you have, the better milk foam or microfoam that you'll create. So more protein availability means better stability and means better microfoam. But this is only true to a point. This is a curve that illustrates the point that when milk is not homogenized, or when it's homogenized at low PSI, down here in the left-hand portion of the chart, you won't get good steaming or good foam from the milk because not enough protein is attached to each fat globule. Same is true on the other end. At the bottom right-hand of the chart, when it's homogenized at high PSI, too much of the protein attaches to each fat globule. What you want is the sweet spot right here at the top of the chart, where just the right amount of protein attaches to the fat, and there's still some free fat floating around in the solution so that you have a nice, stable milk that you can then work with. So that's the science part. Phew. Now back to the story. Guess who it was that told us where this sweet spot was? The baristas, of course, during the Barista Jam. So the interesting thing here is that we created our organic barista milk not through scientific tables, but through trial and error, working in collaboration with our customers. So this idea of collaboration is probably a good segue to go back to that other way that I mentioned our company works with meraki, and that's through our relationships. In our company, we work with 7 different farming families. One of them is the Straus Dairy, and the other 6 are their own independent businesses. We have no ownership in the businesses at all. So at a very basic level, our relationship could be defined as that between just buyer and seller. We try not to do that, though. We want the relationship not just to be a transactional one. We're trying to do more. So if you think back to what I spoke of first, the passion for why Albert Straus, himself a farmer, started this business, it was one, to find a way of life to preserve dairy farming, to preserve a way of life for dairy farmers, rather, that was disappearing, and 2, to farm organically to protect the land for future generations. That passion still exists in our company. And ensuring survival for family farms means creating a system that works for these folks here, these farmers, the processors, and also our customers, all of you, both today and in the future. So, for example, if our dairy farmers tell us that feed prices are going up, and they are right now because of the drought we're experiencing in California, that means their costs go up. That means that we have a responsibility to pay our dairy farmers more. This also means that we increase prices to our customers. That's never an easy conversation to have, but the alternative is to create a system that's dysfunctional and one that won't last. So the idea of creating a functional dairy system is something that's a very important value for us, and again, another topic that I hope will come up later this afternoon in the small group sessions. Finally, the relationship with our customers. Our customers are the most devoted group of people I think I've ever had the opportunity to work with in my time in the food industry. And we're experiencing this and learning about it probably now more than ever. The drought that we have in California is the worst in history. And recently, us, along with other organic dairies, as a result, have had some product shortages. Every single one of our customers have been impacted, and some of them, in serious ways. But when I talk to these folks, what I invariably hear is things like, we get it, we support you, and we'll be there waiting for you when you get through it. So developing that sentiment really only works when you have a system that works for everyone in it. It means not only sharing the story of why we're passionate about this business, preserving a way of life for dairy farmers, respecting the land, the animals, and the environment, but also creating those taste memories that I spoke of earlier. Developing this sentiment involves having conversations and talking about ideas like we're doing here today. So as we conclude, I'd like to remind you that this is just our story, but there are many, many other dairy farmers and dairy companies out there with their own stories and their own reasons for being passionate about what they do. Coffee people, I know, understand what it means to put your soul into something. And the same is true for dairy people. So my hope would be that after listening to some of the ideas I've offered today, that you, no matter what your role in the coffee industry, might be motivated to engage more with a dairy farmer. Or maybe even you'll follow in Mark Inman's footsteps and let your passion for your own craft look for a milk company that rises to the same values you hold for your own business. That you may recognize that the meraki that you have for coffee is the same meraki that we dairy people have for milk. Thank you.